I told the police my parents forced me to drink. So they smeared me online, called me an addict, and had me thrown in a psych ward. They took my freedom, but not my proof. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat curled in the corner of a motel room I'd barely paid for, watching the shadows on the ceiling change with every passing car. I couldn't shake the image of Mason, my brother, my blood, clutching his side, skin yellowing under the porch light, while our parents laughed and offered him whiskey as medicine. And now I knew. He had been trying to escape the legacy, trying to recover, quietly, in secret. But secrets die quickly in our family. If you don't drink, you disappear. I wanted to help him, expose the truth, start with my phone. The voice recording, Benji's message, the AAA proof. I began gathering everything I had. My hands were trembling, but my mind was focused. This time, I would be the one to shine the flashlight into the dark. And that's when the knock came. 3 sharp hits on the motel door. I froze. The peephole showed 2 officers, not the ones from the night before. These wore blank expressions, like they'd already decided who I was. I opened the door half an inch. "Miss Carter," the older one asked. His voice was calm, but firm. "We're here on a court order signed earlier today. You're being placed under an emergency psychiatric hold for evaluation." My heart stopped. What? He held up a clipboard. "Your parents petitioned a judge this morning. Multiple statements were submitted. From family members, neighbors, even community leaders, expressing concern that you may be a danger to yourself or others. The court has authorized a 72-hour involuntary hold. I'm not a danger to anyone," I said, voice rising. "They're the ones who—" "We don't make those decisions," the younger officer interrupted. "We just follow the court's instruction." "No, wait, please. We can do this calmly, or we can call backup." And that was that. They didn't grab me. They didn't yell, but they took everything. My voice, my proof, my freedom, and folded it neatly under the weight of a court stamp and a judge's signature. A judge, I'd later learn, who had been in the same bowling league as my father for 7 years. The psychiatric facility sat on the edge of town like something carved out of another time. Pale walls, slit windows, smiles stretched too thin. They took my phone, my shoes, my sense of control. The intake nurse asked me all the standard questions, each one laced with subtle doubt. "Have you been experiencing hallucinations?" "No." "Any recent drug use?" "No." "I'm sober." 2 years. Your family says otherwise." They're lying. More boxes checked, more notes scribbled down. Every time I tried to explain, it sounded more like defiance. And defiance, in places like this, always reads as instability. They gave me a gray t-shirt, hospital socks, and a roommate who didn't sleep, just muttered to herself all night and scratched at the walls. The door locked from the outside. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the walls. All I could think was, this is what it feels like to be erased. The next morning, I met Dr. Patel, the facility psychiatrist. He was young, professional, and far too calm. His tone was soft, practiced, like he was reading me off a chart, even when he looked me in the eyes. "I'd like to talk about why you're here." I nodded. "But first, I need to explain what's actually happening." "Please," he said, folding his hands. So I told him everything. The forced drinking, the video, the police visit, the years of pretending, Mason's health, the AAA meetings, the way they tried to cover it all with a layer of forced smiles and community connections, the lies they were spinning even now. He listened, or at least he looked like he was listening. Then he opened a folder on the desk. Thick, too thick. "Your parents submitted a history of concerns. Counseling reports from when you were 16, notes about antisocial behavior, mood swings, medical documents. They dragged me to a therapist because I wouldn't do tequila shots at Thanksgiving." "There's more," he said, flipping a page. "Diary entries. You wrote about wanting to disappear, wishing for different parents. I was a teenager. That's not a symptom. That's survival." He didn't argue, but I could feel it. The mental notes he was taking, the category he was placing me in. Just another college girl with trauma and a story too dramatic to be true. They also included videos of you appearing intoxicated at family gatherings. I let out a bitter laugh. I was faking. I poured it into plants, into the sink. I slurred my words so they'd stop pressuring me. "So you pretended to be drunk to avoid drinking." "Yes," I snapped. "It was the only way to be safe." He made a note, and that was the moment I realized Every truth I gave him was being translated into a symptom. If I fought, I was unstable. If I stayed calm, I was emotionally flat. If I cried, I was hysterical. If I didn't, I was disassociated. I was trapped, not by walls, but by the narrative they'd wrapped around me like a straitjacket. So I changed tactics. "There's a doctor," I said. "Her name is Harper. She lives next door to my parents. She has footage, security cameras, notes. She's seen everything." He paused. "Harper, with an H. Yes, Dr. Evelyn Harper." He made another note. "We'll look into that." But I could already tell. He wasn't expecting to find anything useful. In his eyes, I was a well-spoken girl with a persecution complex and a flair for dramatics. And in that place, that made me dangerous, not to others, but to their version of the truth. It wasn't until the third day that everything shifted. Dr. Patel called me in again. His posture was different now, straighter, his eyes clearer. He didn't look like he was speaking from a script anymore. "We spoke to Dr. Harper," he said. "She confirmed your account, provided us with video files, detailed incident logs." I held my breath. "And we also received calls from your employer, your academic advisor, your roommate, and multiple members of your recovery group, all contradicting what your parents reported." I leaned forward. "So I'm not crazy?" "No," he said carefully. "You're not, but your parents still hold your insurance, your financial aid, and your medical power of attorney. They're also threatening legal action, defamation, emotional harm." I stared at the floor. "They don't want me out. They want me discredited." He nodded. "I'm recommending your release, but you need a place to go, somewhere safe, people you trust, because this isn't over." I knew that already, But when the door buzzed open and I stepped into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not freedom, not safety, but something quieter. Proof, and that was enough, for now. The sun was rising as I left that psychiatric facility, pale and indifferent, like it had no idea I'd just spent 3 days trapped inside a reality my parents built out of signatures and lies. A social worker drove me back into town. She was quiet for most of the ride, respectful silence, I think. Until she handed me my phone at a red light and said, "You've got about 30 notifications waiting for you." She wasn't wrong. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Family, neighbors, old classmates. My mother's public post had gone viral in our town. Over 200 comments now, all praying for the poor, tormented daughter who had lost her way and turned on the very people who loved her. But wedged between the noise, I found something else. A single text from Alexandra. "Mason's girlfriend, the mother of his unborn child. He's asking for you. He's awake, but he's scared. That was all I needed. The hospital looked the same as I left it. But inside, everything had changed. Mason was thinner now. His cheekbones jutted out sharply, and the whites of his eyes were still stained yellow. But he was conscious, breathing. His fingers twitched weakly when he saw me. "You came," he whispered. I smiled. "I always do." Alexandra stepped back to give me space. Her face was puffy from crying, but I could see it. The shift. The moment when belief took root. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for not listening sooner, for believing them. You weren't the first, I told her, but you can be one of the last." Mason's voice cracked. They came again. Mom said the doctors were overreacting, tried to get me to sign something, said they'd handle everything." My jaw tightened. "What did you do?" "I told them no. For the first time, I told them no." He looked toward Alexandra and then at her stomach, still barely rounded. "I don't want her growing up thinking this is love," he whispered. "I can't let her think this is normal." I nodded. "Then help me end it." Back at Mason's apartment, I found the box exactly where he said it would be, tucked under his bed, wrapped in an old towel like it needed hiding even now. Inside was everything. Crumpled AA pamphlets with attendance dates, journal entries, one after another, full of guilt, fear, and desperation. Medical records showing liver damage dating back 9 months. Notes about how our parents had shown up at his AA meetings, pretending it was a coincidence. And at the bottom, a USB drive labeled insurance. I plugged it into his laptop. The screen lit up with time-stamped videos. One showed our father pouring vodka into Mason's orange juice and calling it breakfast of champions. Another had our mother swaying on her feet, laughing as she told Mason he was embarrassing the family by going sober. One clip had Mason holding his AA chips in his hand. little plastic coins he had fought for, just before our father crushed them under his boot. I copied every file, every page, and I walked back into that hospital like I had fire in my veins. They were already there, our parents, standing in Mason's room with Uncle Henry. Their lawyer, a thick stack of papers, sat on a rolling tray, and my father's hand was guiding Mason's wrist toward the pen. "Just sign, sweetheart," my mother cooed. "We'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry. Step away from him," I said, my voice low. My father turned first. His expression snapped from performative concern to naked hostility in a blink. "You don't belong here. He's asked for me. That makes it my room too." I held up the USB. "I have everything. All the recordings. All the files. Everything you tried to hide." My mother's eyes widened. She lunged for me, but Alexandra stepped between us. "I called her," she said calmly. "You're not controlling him anymore." That's when the door opened behind us. Dr. Harper, our neighbor, and the only doctor who had dared to stand up to them, stepped inside. "I'm Dr. Harper," she said evenly, "and per hospital authority, I'm designating this patient's sister as secondary guardian pending review of new evidence." "You can't do that," Uncle Henry growled. "Yes," she said, smiling thinly. "I can, and I just did. They fought like cornered animals. My mother screamed. My father threatened lawsuits." Uncle Henry waved a cease and desist letter in the air like it would reverse time. But Dr. Harper wasn't alone. The hospital administrator arrived next, grim-faced and carrying a copy of the USB's contents. Moments later, 2 social workers from Adult Protective Services walked in behind him. And then, the final blow. Jessica's father entered. "I'm here to give a statement," he said, eyes locked on my father, "about what happened to my daughter and how your friends helped cover it up." Behind him came more parents, from the same families who'd once toasted to training nights and called child abuse bonding. But this time, they weren't here to defend the legacy. They were here to bury it. One by one, they told the truth. About bruises, about hospital visits, about their children's broken spirits. And for the first time, I saw my father shrink, not in body, but in power. Mason was rushed into transplant prep less than an hour later. He was listed as a priority patient, based on medical urgency and the documentation of forced alcohol exposure. Right before they wheeled him into surgery, he took my hand. "If I don't make it," he said, "don't let them bury this. Use it. Burn it all down if you have to. Hata." "You'll make it," I whispered, squeezing his fingers. And then they took him. 8 hours later, the surgeon stepped out into the waiting room. His mask was down, and he looked exhausted. But he was smiling. The transplant was successful. He's stable. He's going to need time. But he's going to live. I collapsed into Alexandra's arms and cried like I hadn't in years, not for relief, but because the story was no longer just mine. It was his, too, and we were rewriting it together. Mason came out of surgery with his chest stitched like a battle map, and his eyes glazed with morphine and blood loss, but he was alive. That single fact rewrote everything. I spent the first night beside his hospital bed, holding his hand between mine while machines beeped and nurses whispered, and Alexandra dozed in the chair beside us. Her hand was resting protectively on her stomach, as if already swearing to shield their child from everything we had lived through. When Mason woke the next morning, he didn't smile. He just said, "Is it over?" I shook my head. It's only just started. The fallout came like a slow-building storm. Our parents were placed under psychiatric evaluation for 72 hours after their outbursts at the hospital. But when they were released, they didn't disappear. They retaliated, and they hired new lawyers, more expensive, more vicious, and sued the hospital, the transplant board, Dr. Harper, the attending nurses, Alexandra, me, even Jessica's father, who had given his sworn statement. My inbox filled with legal threats. So did my phone, my student email, even the voicemail at the bookstore where I worked part-time. My mother contacted my professors, my landlord, my academic advisor, whispering concern, warning them that I was unstable, possibly violent, possibly dangerous. I lost my job. 2 professors placed me on academic probation pending evaluation. My university housing was reviewed. I spent nights sleeping on a friend's couch and days building a wall of evidence high enough to protect what little I had left. But the thing about abusers, especially well-practiced ones, is that they don't know when to stop. They win by attrition, by forcing you to exhaust yourself, proving you're not the monster they say you are. Except this time, they pushed too far, because I wasn't alone anymore. And they didn't know that Mason had left a paper trail, and a video trail, a mile long. The police reopened their investigation. So did Child Protective Services. Not just into my family, but the others connected to them. The ones who held weekly training nights, the ones who cheered when their sons could outdrink their uncles, the ones whose daughters went silent before they were old enough to spell hangover. Testimonies poured in, quiet at first, then louder. One girl came forward to describe being hospitalized at 13 after being forced to down 5 shots for losing a family card game. A boy from the neighborhood admitted he faked a car crash injury to escape Sunday whiskey challenges. A woman now living out of state confessed she'd changed her last name just to sever ties. One after another. The curtain dropped. What had looked like a quirky tradition became a criminal pattern. When our parents were arrested, my mother still wore her pearls. She cried in court, told the judge she'd only ever wanted to build strong kids, that I had always been a difficult child, that Mason had a weak constitution. My father said it was all exaggerated, that we were manipulating the system to punish them for being tough, but loving. But the jury had seen the videos. They heard the voice recordings. They watched Mason, still weak from surgery, give his testimony via live feed from the hospital. And they believed him. They believed us. The sentence wasn't long. 2 years each for child endangerment, coercive control, and reckless medical negligence. But it wasn't the prison time that mattered. It was the stripping of power, the public shaming, the unraveling of their social kingdom, thread by thread. Their country club membership revoked. Church leadership removed them. Local newspapers ran headlines like "Beloved community couple convicted, enforced alcohol abuse case." No one called us ungrateful children anymore. They called us survivors. Mason entered a 90-day recovery program the day he was discharged. He didn't ask anyone to come with him. He just packed his things, kissed Alexandra's stomach, and said, "I need to learn who I am without them." He came back stronger, sober, clear-eyed. He took a job at a recovery center across town, started speaking at school events, and eventually, quietly, changed his last name. He wanted their legacy gone from his ID, his insurance card, his future. I understood. I didn't change mine. I wanted them to read it in the byline the first time I published a piece about our story. And I did. The day Alexandra gave birth, Mason held his daughter, Sophia, like something sacred. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "You'll never sip anything stronger than apple juice without knowing what it means." I stood in the corner, watching, a knot in my throat, because it was over. Not the pain, not the rebuilding, but the cycle. The thing that had passed through generations like a virus finally ended here. With him, with her, with us. I ran my marathon that spring. My time was terrible. I didn't care. When I crossed the finish line, I turned to the crowd and saw Mason in the front row, holding Sophia, and Alexandra clapping beside them. Jessica stood next to them, holding up a sign that said, "Born to break cycles." I laughed and cried. And finally, breathed. Sometimes I hear things that our parents have moved 2 towns over, that they tell people their children betrayed them for attention, for money, for fame, that they're victims of a cancel culture that doesn't understand family values. I don't correct them. I don't chase them, because we're not theirs anymore. We never really were. We just forgot for a while. On the 2nd anniversary of that Christmas night, I got a photo from Mason. It was him holding Sophia at her birthday, her curls bouncing, her little hand smearing cake across his shirt. The caption just said, "You saved 2 of us." I sat there, phone in hand, heart still beating like it had something left to prove. We lost our parents. We lost our childhoods. We lost our inheritance, our reputation, our name. But we gained something else, ourselves. And every day we wake up sober, loving, and free. That's the legacy now. And that's enough.